Okay, so hi everybody. Welcome to our second winter readiness webinar, specifically focused on de-icing. My name's John Franklin, and I'm head of safety promotion at EASA here in Cologne in Germany. Warm welcome to everybody. We've got lots of people from all over the world here between both. We're doing this kind of dual session here. Well, we've got lots of people on the WebEx and also people on the YouTube live stream that I was talking about earlier. Just to give you a quick introduction to what's going to happen and to talk through some of the logistics and other things like that. So in terms of our hosts here, so if you didn't join us yesterday, my name's John Franklin and I'm in the studio with.
Hi everyone, I'm Laura Watson. I'm a seasonal readiness manager at EasyJet.
So that's the two of us that are here in the studio, and we'll introduce our panelists in a few seconds. So in terms of this week, if you missed the session on winter readiness, key risks and things like that we did yesterday, you can go to the EASA Together for Safety YouTube channel and watch that. We'll put a link from both the AirOps community site and the event page for this event on the past events part of the EASA website. Once they're all over, we'll put links to all the YouTube videos so you can watch them back and the presentations and things like that as well. This afternoon, if you haven't registered already, from 2 till 3:30 Central European time, we're going to be having our final session on snow clearance. So join us for that. If you haven't signed up yet, you can still do that via the event page and the WebEx, or you can watch it on the YouTube. In terms of some of the logistics now, so if you go to the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, you should see the Slido audience interaction tool, or you will do in about half a second. There now, you should be able to see the Q&A, and we encourage you to ask as many questions as you have. What I would say is you can also upvote other people's questions. So if you have a question, maybe check if somebody's asked something similar already and upvote that. There's nothing worse than having 10 questions at the bottom of the list all about broadly the same thing, because nobody upvoted it. We try and take the most popular. Of course, we'll keep an eye on the list and see how it goes. And it might be that we don't get so many questions, but we see how things go throughout the time. So you can use the Slido if you're in the tool. What you could also do if you want to is, if you have the Slido app, I know some people do, you can then go into that, use hashtag winter 2023 and the code Tango Kilo Lima Alpha Whiskey Papa. I'll leave that on the screen if anybody wants to write it down. Or you can go, if you're on a computer in your office, you can go to sli.do, sli.do, and then the same, use those codes. If you're watching in the YouTube, feel free to put a comment in the YouTube live chat as well, so we'll be monitoring both of those. And as I said, the presentations and the recordings are going to be on the EASA event page, the community site, and our Together for Safety YouTube channel. So it'll be everywhere, so you can always come back to it if you need to. So when we get, in terms of the panelists then, you've introduced Laura already. I'm going to ask the other panelists to introduce themselves now. So Christian, can you introduce yourself first?
Good morning. My name is Christian Zajak. I'm the nominated person ground operations for Ryanair DAC and Malta Air. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks. Great for joining us. And Dimitri, if you introduce yourself.
John, good morning, everyone. My name is Dimitri. I'm a quality manager with Etihad Airways. And for the last 3 years, I've been chairing IATA de-icing quality control pool. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks for joining us. And Greg.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Greg Dabek. I'm head of de-icing operation for Menzies Aviation Europe, also DL70 for Menzies. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks for joining us. And then from the airport side of things, Alain.
Good morning, Alain Gabry from Paris Charles de Gaulle Airport with Group ADP. I'm in charge of winter operations and including de-icing operations at CDG.
Fantastic. And then finally, in terms of fluid provision and that side of things, Jerry.
Yes, good morning, everyone. I'm Jerry Lewis, Chief Technical Officer for Kilfrost, and very much involved in the SAE G12. I'm the fluids co-chair there, and I've also worked extensively on the global standards, which are being currently rolled out to most of the industry. Thank you.
Fantastic, thanks. So as you can see, we've got a fantastic panel of people, and we're going to start the discussion with a presentation from the airline side about the top de-icing issues they saw last year. So I'm just going to pop Laura's presentation up, and then Laura's going to start by talking about some of EasyJet's experiences. So I'll hand over to you, Laura.
Perfect. Good morning, everyone. Welcome back for those that joined us yesterday. Hello to everyone who's joined us. So I'm just going to start by talking from an airline perspective, sort of on behalf of EasyJet and Ryanair. We're kind of collaborating on some of the top trends, top issues that we saw last year, last winter. And this is very much based on the safety reports that came in throughout the season. So perfect. Yeah, so I'll get straight into it. So one of the big trends that we saw was lackable miscommunication. And I think this is something that's very much linked to some of the risks and issues we were speaking about yesterday with sort of an influx of new staff into the industry. But essentially, we've had a few events last winter where spraying was commencing prior to flight deck approval. And what this essentially means is that the aircraft was not configured for de-icing before spraying. So as most of you on the call will likely know, the risks with this happening is ingestion of fluid into the aircraft systems, particularly the APU, which can then cause smell events. And then after that, we have the knock-on effects of those smell events, aircraft AOG, delays on the ground, and etc. So whilst we actually have seen a decrease in smell events from last winter, from the previous winter, it's still very much on our radar, and something that we think can certainly be avoided if we look at that communication between flight deck and de-icing provider, assuming that the flight deck are of course on board. So one of the key learnings that we wanted you guys to take away from this was, you know, if the flight crew are on board, communication is essential to make sure that the aircraft is ready for de-icing, the flight crew are ready for de-icing, and just to sort of agree the plan of action so that everyone knows where everyone is, what's everyone doing, and are they ready for de-icing. So carrying on with the topic of sort of communication then, one of the other trends that we saw out of our safety reports last winter was missing or incorrect de-icing reports. So this obviously can have quite safety critical implications if the incorrect information is actually passed over to our flight crews. So this could result in incorrect holdover times being used, and then obviously delays then awaiting for the correct information. So the learnings that we've taken away from this is that the aircraft should not be dispatched for departure until de-icing or anti-operation has taken place, until the flight crew has been notified of the type of de-icing or anti-icing that has actually been performed. And if there are any sort of question marks over the information that's received from a flight crew point of view, absolutely challenge this. You know, we've had some really good spots this year in terms of contamination still on aircraft and things like that. So encourage the ground crew, flight crew to be vigilant and actually question the information if you're not sure it's correct. And similarly, if early de-icing has taken place, I know that for quite a few carriers, you know, this is essential as part of our operations for first wave departures. But if early de-icing has taken place and the flight crew are not yet on board, just making sure that the de-icing report, all that information that they need is left available or made available to the flight crew when they arrive at their aircraft. So then we move on to another trend. So it was mentioned yesterday, or one of the trends went from IATA's sort of presentation, but incorrect de-icing. So we've seen some events where fluid contamination has taken place on no spray areas of the aircraft. For example, flight deck windows, as you can see in the photograph, pitot probe, static ports. So particular risks with this is that the critical aircraft systems will not function as expected and could have detrimental effects in flight, and obviously delays for inspection, cleaning of those aircraft parts. So obviously this is a key message that we push out ahead of each winter, but about the no spray areas of the aircraft must absolutely be respected. As mentioned, we've got a lot of new staff in the industry, so emphasising the areas of the aircraft that should be not sprayed, but also be aware of the fact that rundown can actually happen and contaminate areas of the aircraft that you may not necessarily be aware of. So my last point before I pass over to Christian, who will go through a couple of the other trends that we've both seen. Some of you may have heard me speak about this in the SAE conference this year and through other sort of forums that I've presented at, but a specific significant event that I wanted to bring to this forum today, just as a learning for everyone, as sort of an awareness piece, is an unreliable airspeed event that we experienced in December. So essentially, one of our A320s experienced unreliable airspeed on takeoff, which then resulted in a mayday call and a return from airborne. Luckily, the return from airborne resulted in a safe landing and it was uneventful, but it was still a significant event that we have taken learnings from. So my colleague in flight operations did a fantastic investigation into this event, and it was deemed that the most probable cause for this event was actually ice ridges on the aircraft, which, as many of you know, then affects the airflow to the pitot probes, which results in unreliable airspeed. So whilst this conclusion isn't 100%, this was actually reached by looking at the behaviour of the data in comparison to other industry events that were very similar. We were uncovering contributory factors that had plausible links to the formation of ice ridges, which I'll go on to in the next slide, and also ruling out other potential causes such as blocked pitot tubes and draining holes. So all of the evidence kind of pointed to the fact that the ice ridges was the root cause. So some of the contributory factors that for this event was that the aircraft remained on stand for over 3 hours in heavy snow conditions, with the outside air temperature between -7 and -3 degrees. So when the aircraft was actually on the ground, they had to wait there whilst the weather conditions improved before any de-icing or anti-icing could actually take place. The flight deck windshield and pitot probes were not kept heated throughout the turnaround, so this was a big learning for us internally and for my colleagues in flight operations, whereby the guidance says that the windshield and the pitot probe should stay heated, but there is a caution there to be aware of the potential of ice ridges forming from contamination, melting and then refreezing. So this was a particularly interesting point that we're taking away internally and communicating that out to our flight community. We were also unable to verify if the post-de-icing and anti-icing check included the fuselage, particularly the area forward of the front doors. So in this scenario, the fuselage wasn't actually treated, it was just the wings and the tail. So we weren't able to verify that actually when the post-de-icing check was completed, whether the whole of the aircraft was checked. Similarly, confirmation was given by the headset that pitot tubes surrounding areas were free of contamination, but we were unable to ascertain whether this person was actually trained to assess this or not. So whilst that information had been given to the flight deck, we are unable to say with certainty if that was via a trained personnel. So some of the learnings then that we've taken internally that I've shared with the community through various forums and that I'd like to share with you all today is really the importance of checking the fuselage, particularly the area of the forward doors, as part of the post-de-icing, anti-icing check. Now, I know this discussion has happened in the SAE and it's something that will be looked at going forward. There is guidance that says that the fuselage is part of the post-de-icing check, regardless of if the fuselage has been treated or not. But this is something that I really wanted everyone to take away today, to make sure that the operatives are completing the full anti-icing, de-icing check, regardless of if the fuselage has been de-iced or not. There's also guidance in SAE documentation to say, if you're checking from height, you need to be able to see from height. And similarly, if you are looking at those areas where potentially you need a good view from the ground, then do what you need to do to be able to have sufficient visibility to check those areas of the aircraft. The second point there, only trained and competent staff should be assessing and confirming that the aircraft is free of contamination. So whilst I've had discussions with a fair few of you about the necessity for ground staff, if they're not the same as the de-icing provider, to be aware of ice ridges, contamination and things like that, whilst I think that's really valuable for our colleagues in our ground ops departments to be aware of these risks, the people that are confirming if there's no contamination on the aircraft need to be trained de-icers or trained in the post de-icing anti-icing check qualification. And the last one, I guess, for the colleagues that are on the line from our flight communities is to consider the Airbus guidance to keep the probe and windshield heat on during the entire turnaround in cold weather conditions. So whilst obviously being aware that there is a risk that if contamination is present near or above the flight deck windshield, that it could melt and refreeze. But this is certainly guidance that we're taking away internally as well. I think.
That's it.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Go for it.
Thanks very much. Hopefully they were all really great, useful tips for you. And we'll hand over now to Christian, who's going to go through some points from the Ryanair side of things.
Is he on mute?
Oh, I don't think we can hear you, Christian. Oh. Is the sound working now? Oh. Ah. Oh no. Can you hear us there? Can you hear us? Maybe try speaking, see if we can hear you. Ah. I don't know what happened again. Try unmuting again now, see if that makes any difference. Doing some good troubleshooting on the fly here. Try unmuting again. Oh, I can see he's muted. Okay, we'll let you restart. We'll if we maybe jump to Dimitri and then Christian will go out and come back. We had a small problem there. So okay, Christian, you restart and we'll move on to Dimitri. Dimitri, do you want to start your presentation then?
Yes, with pleasure. Can you hear me well?
Yes,
Yeah.
perfect.
Okay, let me try to share my screen. Are you able to see?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thanks.
Okay. So again, good morning to everyone, and many thanks to organizers for inviting me on behalf of the DAQCP. One of the major goals of our organization is to promote safe winter operation, and I'm very thankful for the opportunity to speak to the audience today. So let's have a look at what's DAQCP. I know many people in the audience know DAQCP well, but probably there are those who are not that familiar with us. We are the pool that conducts an average of 660 audits every year, and that's a big number. We consist of 139 airlines, and probably by today this number is a little bit bigger. Each member airline has unrestricted access to the whole of the DAQCP database. That means the airlines can use our audit reports, inspection reports for their scheduled flights, for diversions, for ad hoc flights, etc. We do not charge a membership fee and provide free recurrent training to all of our inspectors. We are a data-driven organization, so besides identifying issues, we're also quantifying issues, and we're using the data for our work. You'll see an example of the DAQCP data moving forward. All DAQCP members, as long as they have the process for DAQCP data analysis, are in conformity with IOSA requirements applicable to GRH4. And importantly, we're consistently broadening our geographical presence, and you'll see our footprint on all continents. Thanks to Jerry, who gave us a hint of the DAQCP presence map yesterday. You can see our footprint everywhere where we have snow, where there's icing condition. So I've mentioned we're a data-driven organization. Let's have a look at what is DAQCP data. What you see on the screen now is the summary of our work the last winter season, 2022-2023. As you can see in the left corner in blue, we've conducted a total of 627 audits, which resulted in us raising 1,360 findings, which takes us to an average of 2.17 findings per audit. Similarly to many airlines present in this forum, similarly to many regulators, the AQCP has several levels of findings. We have level 1 to level 3, with level 1 being the most severe safety critical finding. So on average, per audit, we raised 0.54 safety critical findings. But again, we are in today's world. A number of findings doesn't tell us much. What is important is the hazards. What is important? What do we do with these findings? So let's have a look at the graph below. What you see here is top 10 hazards identified by the pool. The blue bars represent numbers of findings. So every finding, we see it as a hazard, and we quantify these findings. So in terms of numbers, operational procedures are the biggest type of findings we're raising, followed by fluid integrity, fluid testing, and training program. However, the number of findings alone is not enough for us. What we do in the pool, we are applying ARMS methodology. I'm sure a lot of people here are familiar with ARMS methodology, but for those who are not, you can have a look at the EASA webpage for the link to ARMS methodology. So every finding is being processed by us, and we are assigning the associated risk. Not surprised for me, surely not surprised for you guys, is that the integrity of the fluids is our major safety risk that we have identified last season and seasons before that. That risk represents 80.7% of the total risk in our network. What do we mean when we say fluid integrity? It's failure of fluids in the vehicles, failures of fluids in the storage, identified by our inspectors in the field, and identified through the review of the lab reports. I know that every organization, every de-icing service provider will conduct several checks of the fluids, mostly in the beginning of the winter season by regulation, in case of any events, etc. Nevertheless, these findings are being among the key findings identified by the pool. So I'd like to encourage everyone to have a look at the supply chain of fluids, the way we store them in storage, we store them in the vehicles, and probably make the necessary arrangements in preparation for the coming winter season. This data is widely available to all of our members. We are willing to share this data with the industry. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you need more data. If you have any other questions, we're always open. We're always there for you. We're working for the safety of the industry. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Dimitri. Really great to kind of help, hopefully, everybody focus in on what the key challenges are and the key topics. And yeah, hopefully that really helped everybody. If you have any questions for anything that Laura or Dimitri so far have said, feel free to put them in the Q&A. Maybe while we wait for Christian to try and join, Greg, maybe we could come to you next. Can you share your screen and do your presentation? Oh, yeah, we'll do Greg and then we'll give Christian a... In fact, let's see if Christian's works quickly, because then we don't give his computer time too long to cause a problem. Christian,
I certainly hope that you hear me now.
Excellent, we hear you. Do you want to go next and share your presentation then?
Definitely, but would you mind sharing it, because I just don't want to risk anything anymore.
No problem.
I do apologize for the inconvenience, and it might be just better that you didn't hear me in the past couple of minutes.
I can imagine, but yeah, if it helps, the WebEx isn't always the easiest system, but yeah, so the presentation's on there.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation, and I'm happy that we will be able to share our experiences with you. It was really good to prepare for the presentation and for this session with Laura, because we saw that we have kind of the same issues. At the same time, we had our own particular special events, and I brought a couple of those to share with you. So if you don't mind, John, please go to the next slide. Well, in regards of aircraft damages, I should say that we were kind of lucky in the sense that we didn't have any structural damages or major damages over the past winter. However, we had our fair share of incidents, and that would also show that what we discussed yesterday, that the de-icers are kind of the top of the flock. They have a good understanding, good experience with operating GSE on the ramp. However, they still may make mistakes due to this reason or the other. What I would like to discuss about this is not actual aircraft damages, because, as I said, we would be just getting lost in smaller skid marks and winglet damages. The thing is that it's not an easy area, like we discussed yesterday with Greg as well. It's outside of the sleep cycle. Everybody's a little bit grumpy, a little bit out of their comfort zone, and they need to operate in this environment. So obviously, starting with the competency-based choice of who should be a de-icer, we will get on with the training, and the training will include all the necessary information, all the necessary modules in regards of the actual operation of the de-icer. However, what we see is that we need to have a constant practice of the skills, and we need to have the training starting early in the summer already, using water, using the buildings if that's necessary, and have the necessary skills and the necessary comfort in operating the rig and actively executing the de-icing for all the personnel present. And what we would stress is that obviously we have different truck types, different dimensions, different features. When you have proximity sensors, like on the more modern equipment, you might be a little bit complacent, you might rely on those, and when you got on another rig which is operated by your company and that doesn't have the proximity sensor, then you might get yourself into a situation where you just didn't pay enough attention to the differences in the equipment. Also, what we'd like to stress is that the operator and the driver, the sprayer, everybody should kind of in comfort during the operation, because if the cabin is not heated, or if there is a rush, a sense of rush on the ramp running from one stand to the other, that also will contribute to an aircraft damage, as everybody here knows perfectly. We also stress the teamwork between the crew and the ground crew, within the ground crew, just to make sure that there is no misunderstanding and there is no complacency, and everybody is kind of looking out for each other. I will stress these parts later on in the case studies that are coming now. So if you don't mind, John, please. Thank you. So as I said, I brought case studies, 3 of them, and 2 will consider the incomplete de-icing. This particular situation was, I should say, it was interesting from the point of view of the teamwork between the flight crew and the ground crew. Also, there was a certain element of ego, I should say, on the side of the ground crew. As you can see, there was an early de-icing, which brings its own risks, like Laura mentioned earlier. And when the early de-icing was completed, the paperwork was done as well. The crew found, well, suspected and then found clear ice on the wing, and then they had to argue a little bit with the de-icing company, because the de-icing company or the representative was adamant that they did a good job. It turned out that they didn't, and there was indeed clear ice on the wing. And well, they had to redo the whole operation, and we had to delay the flight with that. I should say that this is happening occasionally, but it was a singular case when an argument arose. And this is why I mentioned that ego shouldn't enter the equation here. Also, there are certain practices which can be used, and I just wanted to mention one which I really liked. One of my colleagues in the self-handling locations actually kept wing part in the freezer, and they used it for the training of the de-icers, and then they were able to make sure that there was a basic understanding of the tactile check need and the clear ice, how the clear ice looks during the training already. Thank you.
Sorry, here we go.
Thank you. So once again, an incomplete de-icing risk. The thing here is that we actually had a sleet of shower the night before, the snow shower the night before, and then again we had a precipitation during the night, which created the second layer of ice. The interesting thing was that the second shower happened after the early de-icing. So what I'm missing here is the communication and what you mentioned yesterday, responsiveness, which is part of the EASA safety message for this particular area. I would think that the ground crew, the de-icer service provider, should have been a bit more responsive and pay attention to the weather changes. Obviously, they saw the shower of the snow, and they should have at least started the communication with the crew instead of waiting for the captain to arrive on the ramp and to actually find the fluid residue and the precipitation on the wing. Well, this is indeed was an annoying case because apart from the 40 minutes, initially they used almost 2,000 liters of de-icing fluid for the early de-icing, and then again they needed to use almost 900 liters just to make sure that the aircraft can depart clean. So complacency and the ego were elements of the problem in these two cases, and what we emphasize and what we try to enforce, that the cooperation communication is imperative in this operational aspect. And the best judgment will come from the practice and the training, but also listening to others. So I just advertise again that the communication between the flight crew and the ground crew is one of the items that we are very much looking on and discussing with our flight operations colleagues as well. Thank you. And this one will be a little bit more extensive, and I would like to use my notes because it was a really interesting case which we are extensively discussing with the CAA. So on the day of the event, all the staff members and the equipment were prepared for the de-icing activities. And as per the local work setup, the shift started with a briefing before the operational peak, and they were actually discussing the expected conditions and parameters. And they actually discussed two ways of the de-icing, the one step with 50-50 ratio of type 1 fluid, and two step with 20-80 ratio of type 1 fluid as first step, and the 100% type 4 fluid as the second step. And the problem here was that this actually happened on two flights. So we had the same dispatcher who actually served as the de-icing inspector on both flights, and due to his, I really wouldn't like you to think that I'm blaming the guy, but he was an inexperienced person. It was his first de-icing season, and he was obviously trained, evaluated, but still I think maybe the organization should have paid more attention to him and his peers in their first de-icing season. And there was, on top of this, a misunderstanding between the de-icing coordinator and the dispatcher, because they were actually discussing the matter, as I said before, but there was a misunderstanding between them, and the dispatcher thought that he understood the advice as well, but they actually mixed up a little bit during the turnaround. So the good part of this, however, is that the event was reported by the people involved and the service provider itself to the airline. So we had a very good cause of the just culture, and they were doing a very proper investigation and then a very proper follow-up. So we had a few corrective and preventative actions in this case, and the responsible dispatcher was suspended after this incident, but then received a very complex one-on-one refresher training by the head of de-icing training. There were head of operations this instruction coming into effect in a few days, and this was to initiate a verbal conversation with the de-icing coordinator on duty before any de-icing activity would start, and this would include a cross-check with covering the used fluid and mixture ratios, aircraft surfaces, and the fuel tank temperature as well. And also there was a strong recommendation that all staff should actually call the direct number of the de-icing coordinator if they have any doubt. And once again, this is refers back to what I said earlier. It's not about ego. Everybody can be uncertain. Everybody can be less than having a less than complete memory of the training contents, and it's always better to ask. Thank you. And the last one is really just general feedback, which we agreed on with Laura. And I just want to mention that it's neither an EasyJet nor Ryanair aircraft that's on the picture. So input, like I said, we need to have the input from the ground crew. And if we have any discrepancy, anything that they are a little bit doubtful about, they should communicate it to anyone or not. And then when we have the actual collisions, or we have an actual return to stand, that's the input, and all of them are just inputs for the safety investigation. And these will be communicated, this should be communicated, and that will only result in a proper anti-icing and getting everybody who should be supporting on the site, making sure that they would be able to actually execute their job and make sure that the aircraft can depart safely. And of course, the safety reporting, which is a basic requirement for any provider with a safety management system, which will collect the evidences, advises the stakeholders, and then obviously we will have a full safety investigation with all involved fully informed, and which should actually result in the safety improvement. And this is really not just between the ground handling agent or the de-icing provider and the airline, but it should involve, and occasionally will involve everybody else, not just the airport operator, for example, but the manufacturers of the fluid, the rigs, or even the aircraft. I mean, just over the last winter, we had cases which were actually sent for consideration to the aircraft manufacturer's safety review board, and hopefully it will result in improvement in the manufacturing process as well. So that was it for me. Thank you for your attention, and I hope that we will have an uneventful winter season this year. Thank you.
Fantastic, thanks for that, Christian. And ironically, so before I came to EASA, my last job was in the UK Military Aviation Authority at RAF Northolt, and I used to ride my bike past that house to work every day. which was particularly interesting. And I can confirm it. Yeah, it doesn't look like that anymore. No. So we've got some interesting questions coming. We'll take some of the questions, I think, a little bit later on, and I've got some kind of interesting things myself to come back to based on what we've heard already. But Greg, if I come to you next, and you could talk a bit about your experience from the Menzies side of things.
Yes, John. First of all, thank you for inviting me to the call. Hopefully, you can see my screen.
Not yet.
Trying to.
Yeah, no, that's perfect.
Okay, it works. So first of all, thank you for invitation and glad to be here. I've looked through attendees, and I have to say that we got thousands of years of experience within de-icing. So I think it's good to gather everyone from within the industry to discuss a lot of issues and topics we still got. I think we covered a lot yesterday in our free conversation about what's going on and how where we're heading and what we're doing. I think for Menzies, we have 18 de-icing stations in across the Europe. 16 of these stations actually de-ice, and 2 provide oversight to the de-icing. What we need to bear in mind that we are across the Europe, so not everything will fit the same model. Different countries deal with different problems, issues, and so on. So I think we need to make sure that every single country, station almost, have a bespoke way of dealing with things. So what we need to understand is that apart what Jerry said yesterday, and having 6285, 6286, and 63332 as a basis for de-icing, there are 3 very important parts of de-icing, which are people, fluid, and equipment. I think we need to understand that there is a big problem when it comes to every single one of them, and we concentrate mainly on people, but I think we need to go through every single one of them. So equipment, I think before pandemic, no one heard about mothball. It seemed like when pandemic hit, everyone decided to mothball all equipment, park them for a number of years, and then all of a sudden we decided that we need to start flying and put this equipment into use. Without extensive maintenance, and then putting equipment into use, we risked that there was a breakdowns, and we had some operational issues when it came to de-icing rigs. So what we do differently, and what we already started, is extensive maintenance on our rigs. Now they are being serviced, calibrated, tested for upcoming winter. Obviously, different countries have different regulations, but I think we follow SAE, and all required maintenance will be provided for our rigs. We also look into additional spare parts to reduce downtime. I think in a heat of winter and there is snow falling, everyone is trying to get aircraft de-iced and off the ground. Any downtime for any de-icing rig is definitely not something what we want to see. So we looked into that. We work with our service providers across the Europe, with the rig manufacturers and other parties, to purchase, have on a shelf spare parts to make sure that we there, and we don't spend too much time on maintaining or fixing the rigs. The other part of our de-icing operations fluids. Nothing much to say here. We got Jerry here, who's going to be presenting from Kilfrost's point of view. We do have other fluid manufacturers within Europe. From our point of view, and you know, I think Dimitri mentioned that a lot of DAQCP findings were the fluid failures. We do understand that, and we take care of our fluid. You know, I think from start of the season and mid-season fluid testing, which we always do, and then post any maintenance on the de-icing fluid system testing, we also always carry out. But I think fluid is there. Our maintenance on the storage facilities is always done. So you know, we order all the fluid prior to the season, and then during the season maintain it at 80%. So reassurance to airlines, we fingers crossed will never run out, but obviously there is always a risk. You know, it's I think in the adverse weather conditions, we heavily rely on deliveries on a chain and supply chain, and obviously fluid manufacturers. I'll let Jerry to probably touch base on MPG and how that shapes our fluid supplies. But you know, there's always something interesting every winter when it comes to fluid supply. And now people. So post-COVID recovery was slow, and I think we looked into it yesterday as well. Into last spring, we kind of expanded, started flying again, but there was no people. That put a lot of pressure during the last summer on the ground handlers and other service providers to actually have people in place. So that's probably then lingered into winter 22-23, and we're still recovering from that. Skills were not where we needed them. A lot of pushback drivers were also de-icers, but they needed to push back the plane, not de-ice it. So labor market was very small, with people looking for the career somewhere else. I think a lot of people lost faith in aviation as a good employer and a career for life. We had a lack of adequate oversight. Yes, our safety team were there, but they also had to overview other activities, not only de-icing. So I think that was a risk, and I think we discussed that yesterday, that we need to make sure there is also you know, we are there for our teams, look after them. And the lack of trainers or SMEs, as I mentioned, a lot of good people left the business. They went somewhere else, and we had people with 2-3 years as maximum to be SME. I think we need to make sure that we keep these people and retain them with the business. So what we've learned, we're retaining people from summer to winter. I think huge influx of people for the summer into the business, and then we don't want to offload them. We want to keep them as a good assets for next summer, but in the winter they will be our good de-icers. Upskilling staff to be part of the training team and increase oversight. So our teams currently are going through the upskilling process, where they will be smart inspectors. Smart is a system we're using for our oversight over the de-icing operations, and they will be out there on ramp, making sure that everyone is safe and do what they're supposed to be do. We're empowering staff to say something and give us a feedback. Over the several years, de-icing was overlooked, especially in some of the regions where it's only ad hoc ad hoc service. It's not something what we do every day, and not always we listen to people. So now we want to reach out. We're reaching out and trying to gather all the feedback to make sure that everything is there. We also changed a bit of how we deal with the Deicing teams. We focus on the core staff mainly at the moment, and then we will build up resilience. I think what we seen over previous years that unfortunately weather is very unpredictable, and we try to do everything at once, but it doesn't always work. So we're gonna look into the staggered approach and make sure that we've got first the core staff, and then slowly build down resilience. You know, and I think that's going to be a priority. Yet again, it will all depend on the location, how where we are in Europe or in the world, and make sure that you know, all our customers are you know, trained. Also, more in-depth training, including last year incidents and accidents. It is always a part of our training, and I believe very important part of that. But we always concentrate on stations. I think we need to share it in more widely, and make sure that everyone understands. I do appreciate that some of the station DIs only on stand, some of them only on remote locations, but I think it's important that we share that, and what Christian and Laura also said, that you know, communication is a key here. And also utilization of technology, simulators, training aircraft. And I think there's a shout out to all the airlines and airports here where we operate, and probably for other service providers. Help us out. Training is something what we need to do, and you know, if you have a spare aircraft, we can spray some water. Let us know. We quite gladly take that opportunity on board, and definitely we'll utilize that to the full for our crews. And what we're working on to improve, well, I touched base on this yesterday, and winter readiness tracker for stations. I think it's a document which we can share with the airline, or at least give overview where we are, and a lot of airlines would like to see where we are in different stages. So definitely something we will be you know, looking into and share with the airlines. De-icing safety promotion. Briefing note for not de-icing personnel. Something we started last year, and we're going to update this for this year, and share with mainly pushback drivers, headset operators. What it is, it's basically very simple documents showing contamination on different parts of the aircraft where shouldn't be, and just gives probably a bit of a solution to what Laura and EasyJet experience with the, you know, saying, oh, pitot heads are clear and everything else. That gives a pushback driver and headset operator just the idea, just a question. Maybe you know, it might be not relevant, but you know, give the or empowers them to question or flag up something to the pilot, making sure that aircraft is clear as it's supposed to be, and I think they also then can alert the captain or someone else or engineer to complete the you know, proper checks and make sure that the aircraft is actually clear. Communication, and what Laura said, and Christian as well, is a key. We use and utilize de-icing program of Chura, which prompts us to check with the pilot whether or not aircraft is configured. And I think since we introduced that, number of events and where we sprayed with the APU not configured or aircraft not configured definitely dropped, and that's probably what helps us a lot. And also ACAS and AFB's messaging, where we can pass anti-icing code directly to the aircraft. All the times are stamped electronically, so there is no miscommunication, whether that's 3, 9, or 5. All the times are recorded. They can be sent directly to the flight deck with the anti-icing code as per SAE, and that should also reduce a lot of miscommunication and as Laura mentioned, incorrect holdover time use and so on. That leads me to the further improvements in recording and reporting of the de-icing events from our system. We can share with the airlines. Also, we can share view-only portal for every airport, any airline within our network, so they can see what's happening. Also, promotion of de-icing, remote de-icing in the airports, and I think what Christian mentioned just a minute ago was when we rush between one aircraft to the other, we can heat it, we can damage, and so on. The remote parts where possible, and I think it is a key to it. We wait for the aircraft, not rushing between the aircraft, between the stands. So I think that's something what we would promote with the airports and airlines. With airlines backing, we do have key airports where we need to start utilizing this, and it will help. OTP, but also the safety. And as a final note, I think we got involved in a project in Oslo where a company called MSG is hoping to build de-icing tent, where we are hoping to get involved and be oversight on that. So technology and something what we can reduce the human input definitely will be way forward. So any questions or comments?
Thanks for that, Greg. I think we've got different questions for different people. So what we'll do is maybe we move on to Alan and then Jerry's presentations, and then we'll take all the questions at the end, and I can link them all together, and we can go through them all. So Alan, can you go next and provide your view from an airport perspective?
Yes, sure. Just let me start. Can you see it?
Yep, perfect.
Great. So Laura and John asked me to share some experience from Paris CDG, and I will talk a little bit to you about our experience in communication. Let me present you how we do de-icing here. We have 20 de-icing pads. We can use 12 of them at the same time, depending on the wind configuration. They are built very close to the threshold for holdover time reasons, of course. And we need to relocate the de-ices in case of a change of the configuration. The management of the pads, of course, we anticipate the opening of the pads in case of when we expect some freezing conditions or snow. We need, of course, the pilots to request de-icing as soon as possible for us to be ready on time when they need it. And we ask them to perform their checklist outside our de-icing pad to improve de-icing capacity. We are an ACDM airport with a pre-departure sequence, and the de-icing operation is included in the pre-departure sequence. And the flight allocation is made in this sequence, and the choice of the pad is done by the control tower just before entering the pad. And we also the management of the pad is also done by the CDM cell, which will open in case of an event of snow. A few records from our part. We have each year between 800 and 7,000 flights de-iced. and we de-iced up to 500 aircraft in 24 hours. We have about 700 departures per day. The biggest figure we did in 1 hour is 49 aircraft, and we have each season about 90 days of effective de-icing per season, 90 days. And up to 130 airlines. We de-ice all airlines. We are the only service provider. We have 50 de-icing trucks. We are buying this year 17 hybrid Vestergaard Elephant Beta, which we will use during this season and on. We have 2 suppliers to diversify our sources, and we have large quantities of ADF in stock, and retaining basins on all our pads. We have a training area with an aircraft. We have, in fact, an extra pad for training, and we use it a lot. Everyone will use it for training at the beginning of the season. We also use a lot of videos for the training, and our subcontractor, Groupe 3S Alysia, has bought a de-icing simulator, 4 positions de-icing simulator, and this is important because they can also practice on communication. Also, another pad reconstituted for training. A few words about communication. I would like to present to you 2 cases. That this one happened last winter. We received an air safety report from a pilot who said he lost quite some time during de-icing due to a misunderstanding with the de-icing coordinator. So he told him about lowest fuel temperature for the calculation of the louts, but the ground de-icing coordinator did not understand it well, and he understood that he should de-ice the lower surface of the wing instead. So the misunderstanding went on, and they started the de-icing, but when the captain realized what was happening, he asked to stop the operation, and then after that, the aircraft was de-iced properly, but with sometimes lost, as you can imagine.
Alan, can you?
We tested. Yeah.
It's okay.
Yes.
You suddenly the sound stopped, but it's come back now. So that's good.
Okay. Sorry about that. The English level of the ground de-icing coordinator, who was a new staff, was tested, and it was compatible with the position held. So we checked that, and the lowest fuel temperature is not in the SAE standard phraseology, so we misled him. But anyway, we did a refresher training for this person, and in line with the hold over timetables and the cold soak winds areas and communication in general. We did that for all the staff to make sure in the event of such a request from a captain, they would be sure to understand properly the request of the captain. So this was the first case I wanted to tell you about. And the second one, which was it's much older, but it was very serious for us, and we changed our procedure for following that. The pilot requested a one-step process, wings and tail, and the ground de-icing coordinator said, we begin a treatment. Please hold position, and I will call you back when treatment is completed. So the 2 de-icers on the wing, well, on each pad, we use 4 de-icers, 2 at the front and 2 for the tail. The 2 de-icers on the wings completed their treatment and withdrew to the safety area, and the captain and pilot saw these de-icers fold up, and they assumed the treatment was completed. The captain then contacted the ground for taxi, but hopefully the co-pilot remained on the pad radio frequency, and the aircraft started moving forwards, and the de-icing on the tail was not finished. There was still a de-icing truck. So when they saw that, the ground de-icing coordinator asked the captain to stop right away, and he did, because he was still on the pad radio frequency. And the operator positioned at the rear had just enough time to to put the de-icing unit extended arm in an upper position to avoid contact with the aircraft. So this was a very serious incident. Even though it was a long time ago, we are still taking this into consideration, and we now, as a preventive action, we put a de-icing truck right in front of the aircraft, meaning when the front de-icers, the de-icers treating the wings, have finished first, one of them will go right in front of the aircraft until all of the de-icing truck will have gone back to the safety area, the green zebra. And as you can see on the picture and on here, the green one will take this position until everyone is back on the zebra. This is well, I know some of you use cars, so maybe the car would go in front of the aircraft, but we don't use car as we have control towers close to our de-icing pads. But that's why we put the de-icing truck right in front of the aircraft. A few words I could mention again that what we use to reduce possible misunderstanding. On each de-icing pad, we use only one frequency. We have one frequency per de-icing pad, and one ground de-icing coordinator speaking to one pilot in one aircraft. We don't use the same frequency for several pads at the same time. The staffing, the ground, when we hire ground de-icing coordinators, of course, we request a good level of English for clear communication. And we always ask our ground de-icing coordinators to use the standard phraseology to avoid unsafe conditions, to avoid unsafe situations. Sometimes pilots will not use the standard phraseology, so we ask our de-icing coordinators to always bring them back to the phraseology and to stick to the process. We also use message boards to enhance communication. We use them for taxi instructions and also to confirm the anti-icing code. And to confirm what is transmitted by the radio frequency, they have a visual confirmation. Another thing that we have put in place for quite some years now, but which can be useful to avoid miscommunication, is that we made a de-icing anti-icing pilot brief sheet, and we hand it over to the airlines so that the pilots can access it. And it's a presentation of how we do de-icing in CDG. It's a presentation of our facilities with the location of the pad, the VHF frequencies, the fluids used. It's also a reminder of specific features of de-icing at CDG. Before de-icing, for the entrance of the pad and the de-icing procedure, and also for the exit of the pad. And we also mention the technical de-icing, which is not done in our pad, but before departure on the parking stand. So this also can be useful to avoid some miscommunication. And we are happy when the pilots have them. Well, this is what I could say about this presentation, John.
Fantastic, thanks for that. It's great to see all these through all these presentations. Just so many great lessons. I'm thinking particularly of our Conversation Aviation magazine and follow-up promotion. To take all of these lessons, and something we talked about yesterday is sharing all of these things. And I think today has just shown so many awesome examples with really practical solutions that hopefully helps so many people over the coming winter and beyond. So that was great, fantastic. Thanks for that, Alan. And we'll come and say to the questions at the end. And Jerry, if we come to you now and give your point of view from the fluid side.
Okay, John, how does that look?
Perfect, thanks very much.
Good, excellent. Hello to everyone. Again, I'm quite conscious some of the other people during this seminar have touched on fluids. It's something obviously close to my heart, and also to the heart of my technical service person, because they see thousands of samples submitted at the start of the season and thousands of samples in the middle of the season. So we not only send out the fluid that we think is in spec, we see an awful lot of what comes back from the field. Obviously, anti-icing is the key technology which allows us to have the right sort of holdover time to allow planes to get to the runway, get down the runway, and to take off with the clean wing. So what I'm going to do is just go through the fluid parameters, why they are important, and why we have to be very careful of anything that falls out of the specification of the fluid. Key thing I'll say is the fluid is designed to collapse on takeoff to leave a clean wing as the plane does take off. So the thing is designed to collapse at the right time. We prefer that the fluid is not collapsed before it actually goes on the plane and for that vital 30 seconds when the plane is going down the runway. Okay, this is a very simple slide, but I hope you can follow me through this. Quality test appearance, well, that's obvious and simple, isn't it? Okay, what are we really testing? We're testing that there's no contamination or degradation of the fluid, that the fluid is yellow or green or orange, and it's not looking like coffee, where we've seen some samples come back in our labs and it looks like it's coffee. So what we're checking for, particularly with regard to contamination, we send tankers of fluids out and we have QC samples of everything that we've sent out, and we maintain those for 3 years. We know the stuff that leaves from our site is good. But of course, you are actually putting the fluid in a tanker. The tanker moves the fluid about by using hoses. I'm sure in your own storage area, you have hoses for transferring stuff. And of course, when it gets into the rig, it depends upon what's in the rig and how you fill the rig. So appearance, simple test, but at the same time, it does give you an idea of whether the fluid is still in pristine condition or whether there has been some sort of problem. Reactive index, this is trying to get to the right freeze point. Put in brackets buffer. I think Christian mentioned this, that it's not about simply having the right freeze point for the outside air temperature. It's also with the buffer included, so that you make sure that you've got the right concentration of the type 1, type 2, or type 4 that you're actually putting on the plane. I'm very pleased that Christian came up with that comment. pH is, again, relatively simple test, but at the same time, what you're looking at is, has the pH moved over time? And if the pH moves, then the quality of the fluid may be degraded simply by the pH moving. It may look good, but if the pH changes, that says that something's wrong. One of the ways in which we see pH change is, of course, overheating of fluids, oxidation in the air leading to the pH going down. And we also know that pH changes if there's rust contamination, either in the main storage tank or in the vehicle which carries the fluid. Viscosity for the thickened fluids, this is obviously really, really key. The right aerodynamics, you can't have fluid which is too thick. Otherwise, if it stays on the wing, you will not have a clean wing on takeoff. What you will have is a jelly-like substance which coats the wings, which can upset the aerodynamics and make the plane very hard to control. So you do not want the viscosity being too high. And also, the viscosity can't be too low, because the right holdover time is predicated on the fact that there's a minimum viscosity of fluid. If it goes outside that, that basically says the holdover time is likely to be wrong. So, simple summary. Fluid in specification says the fluid is fit for purpose. Key points for winter operations, storage and use. If you're actually going to keep the fluid in good condition, circulate any main bulk tanks and rigs as regularly as you can. Make sure the fluid is thoroughly mixed. Taking representative samples, it's a bit of an art form. You would like to take it from the middle of the tank where hopefully the fluid is homogeneous, or from a fluid stream if you're taking a sample out of the tank and actually testing it. If you are actually taking a side stream, then you need to purge the line that actually the fluid goes through to ensure that it is well flushed. And this, in some cases, may require approximately 50 litres of fluid to flush through the line before you can actually say it's a representative sample. And of course, when it comes to heating and spraying, there are recommendations about how to do this and what the fluids are tested to. If we're looking for samples for laboratory assessment, again, clean, well labelled, dry plastic sample container, preferably 500 mils. Avoid water contamination. This is one of the common problems, washing out of rigs, sample equipment, rain and the snow actually falling into the bottle. And it's the refractive index that goes out of its specification with the addition of water. The whole point behind doing a check of the refractive index before submitting a sample is just to make sure that it's not cross-contaminated in some way with some form of water. Out of specification refractive index is the single biggest fluid failure occurrence that we see from all the thousands of samples that we get submitted. Okay, we'll run through the basics. And just one final slide. We've talked about the quality tests and where they feature for the performance. But I go back to simple statement, fluid in specification, fluid fit for purpose. If we protect the fluids, we'll be able to protect the planes. Okay, so thank you for listening. I'll hand back to John. Thanks, John.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Jerry. And thanks to everybody. As I said, it was great to get so many really practical views on this, and it's good, perfect timing as well. We've got 10 minutes and hopefully some really good questions to come to. I'll quick, before I come to the first one at the top of the list, I was just going to go to the first question we got in, actually came in on the chat, was about from Laura's example about the turnaround case and the things like APU usage and all the different things using for time and how that might conflict with environmental procedures. And interestingly, one of the things we're working on at the moment for the next magazine is there's a group called the ATPG who are doing a lot of work, particularly supporting flight crew training, and they've been developing some work as part of the EAPS MCC training around basically with guidance on what environmental flying looks like from end to end. And a key part of that is obviously having caveats where, yes, not using APU in certain circumstances is beneficial from an environmental perspective, but obviously where safety situations like prevention of icing and whatever takes precedence over environmental procedures like that. So certainly it's something we're addressing, and I know there's lots of discussion, particularly in the flight crew training community, to make sure that the right messages are passed out as more and more environmental measures are developed. So I thought I'd just address that because it's something I know the answer to. There's a question there. It's about the Ryanair event, the top one here, about the de-icing supervisor choosing a particular type of treatment and the pilot in command communicating then the fuel temperature. And I think, maybe I come to you, Christian, but I guess that's, is what you were talking about the importance of communication is just the key thing, is that discussion between the people doing the work and the flight crew about the situation that they're dealing with together.
I was talking about the teamwork as well, and well, I should say the teamwork was here but not in the way I was looking for it. Obviously, I was talking about the ground operations aspect, but my colleagues at the flight operations department, they were looking at the case from their perspective as well. What I wanted to mention is that, yes, the last sentence about de-icing crew does not have the fuel temperature. One of the corrective actions was an enhanced attention on the fuel temperature. And I also should say that de-icing crew is attentive because the local frost is forming. I don't know, we had in June local frost forming because of the fuel temperature. So this is something that the de-icing crew should and need to pay attention to.
Greg, I saw you had your hand up on that one as well.
Yes, I think that's very interesting because that boils down to communication, and I think within your anti-icing code, percentage of the fluid for type 1 is not required to pass to the crew. Therefore, you know, if the pre-treatment communication is not right, we potentially can see quite you know, and maybe that's why your cold spots or clear ice remain on aircraft, because incorrect fluid mixture was used. So from the ISA point of view, yes, we need clear communication, especially when only type 1 treatment was decided, that we have the lowest temperature, you know, of the fuel, not OAT, because going by OAT, we can have a serious accident by you know, fluid refreezing on the aircraft. So it is a valid point, and you know, I think it's both the ISIS and pilots need to be fully aware of that.
And it's interesting. So there's a wider philosophical debate. Certainly, many people in the safety management world that I spend a lot of time in continually debating. And in the safety map we had yesterday, we had the 6 areas, and particularly the compliance and risk part is that, you know, as an industry, as a very regulated industry, there's a lot of focus on compliance. But one of the bits that we have lots of debate over, we actually added a box above it called almost like the safety purpose. And it's, you know, we have compliance in a very regulated industry, but, you know, in fact, my colleague Alberto mentioned to me there in a comment that, you know, with regards to that question about the Ryanair aircraft, is that, you know, it's ultimately the pilot and command's responsibility. These, you know, there might be a contractual compliance met, but it's ultimately for the pilot and command to be happy that he or she has the aircraft clean and ready to take the flight that they're going to take. And I think, you know, comes back to that. What's the purpose? The purpose is to take off safely with whatever, and then, you know, the rest of it kind of feeds from there. And hopefully that's where the communication takes place, and all the people, the training, the resources, all comes together. And actually that feeds quite nicely. We talk about people and resources. Perhaps, Greg, if I came to you first with this one. So there's a question, and there's a couple of other related ones. Particularly, winters are becoming, in some parts, particularly in parts of Southern Europe, gradually milder, shorter, with less winter. And the hazard then of, you know, how do you do anti-icing, de-icing activities in places where, you know, it may never happen, or it happens maybe once for 12 hours in one winter. And, you know, how do you deal with that on a Europe-wide? Obviously, you have places where it happens every year and you guarantee it, but how do you deal with that from sort of a skills and training and responsibility perspective, perhaps in a place where it might happen once for 12 hours all year, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so I think it's luckily enough we haven't got many stations in these regions where it's nice and sunny, and all of a sudden we might get one frosty morning. I think the training is the same. I think operating the truck, you can go through the motions of that, but I think a lot of discussion was about sending people to the other stations. to make sure that they have at least a couple of events under the belt, and choose the similar station with a similar setup, similar type of rig, de-icing rig, and send them to refresh them on a couple of occasions. Pick a week or so, and that's what generally we would do if there is a really lack of operations for some of the station. And I think also the new staff live sign-off, which is a massive problem for some of our locations. We probably are going to raise it with the SAE because it seems from some of the locations that live spray it might not happen for 2 or 3 years, and how are we going to deal with that? And from compliance point of view, it is a massive headache for everyone. So we're looking into moving people to the other stations to make sure that they're compliant.
I think as well, if I can, John,
Yeah.
just add, I think it's also about empowering new staff members to actually, when it comes to their first de-icing task after their sign off, or if it's very rare within that winter season, empowering them to have the confidence to stop, take some time, think about things. If they have any questions, like you were saying, Greg, ask the question. Don't be afraid to just take that moment to reset and kind of remember what you've been taught in training, rather than throwing people in the deep end and expect them to remember everything, because like you say, it may be in a long time before their training has taken place. So I think that's particularly important, that support we give staff members.
And I think it's interesting because there's another question from Stefano Prola Iata about the difficulty of retaining and fully staffing stations, which you cover quite well there, but particularly in terms of the retention. There's first of all something we've got an EPAS task on is promoting all of the different careers and the breadth of careers and some of these different activities that people can get involved in, that particularly people who work outside the industry might not know about, as one step to get more people in. But then it's how you look after people when they come in, so you get that retention. I guess that's a big part of your work every day, I guess, particularly Greg and also Alan with your teams at Charles de Gaulle, is how you support and look after them so that once you've trained them, they stay to kind of bring in, to give the service back for the training and the effort you've put in supporting them.
So I think from our point of view, not always the cuddle work, but I think we try to put as much time and aside for them, listen to them and give them appreciation, and also give them knowledge, and also empower them to make the decision and grow as a within the company. So obviously some monetary bonuses and that they're always there. And we make sure that when work is put in, we reward with that. But I think money is not always the top priority for some people, and that's why we come with the a talk, trip somewhere, or conference where we go out and have a dinner together. So there are many ways we can appreciate stuff and keep them. Because if you think about it, to train a new de-icing operative, it's a cost between 15 to 2,000 euros. And to lose them and train them every year, it is a massive cost to the business as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a really good point there. So we're coming towards the end of our time. There are a couple of bits I was just going to touch on just before we finish. So there was a point at the bottom about a question. I'm just going to highlight it there. Is the EASA or regulator considering putting de-icing, anti-icing matters under the aerodrome operator responsibility by accepting subcontracting? That question there. So I was just with my colleague Adina. So we were talking yesterday about how in the next parts of the ground handling regulation, there will be discussion generally about how de-icing and anti-icing comes into that. So these are the kinds of discussions that will take place then. So it's something that, you know, all the things around this activity in terms of future rules will be part of that future discussion that my colleagues in the aerodrome teams will be leading with the industry anyway. So it's worth mentioning that. And then for the other questions, haven't got so much time to cover them all. But what we're going to do, as I said yesterday, we'll use this Conversation Aviation magazine and our AirOps community site. We'll have a dedicated winter ops kind of special for the next version of the magazine that will come out probably on the 7th of October. So we'll take hopefully all of the parts of these discussions and other questions that we've got here and feed those in, so we've got other answers hopefully to all of the other questions that came through as well. So thanks very much. Huge thanks again to all of our panelists, to Laura for being in the studio here. And you know, I'd say I was really blown away by just how practical that session was. And yeah, it was really good. So thanks to everybody, and thanks to the audience for the interactions. And yeah, hopefully you'll see us in 1400 Central European time for the snow clearance session in a couple of hours. Thanks very much. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.